Clarence Rivers King was an American geologist, mountaineer, and author. He served as the first director of the United States Geological Survey from 1879 to 1881. King was noted for his exploration of the Sierra Nevada. Early life and education. Clarence King was the son of James Rivers King and Florence Little King. Clarence's father was part of a family firm engaged in trade with China, which kept him away from home a great deal, and he died in 1848. Sir Clarence was brought up primarily by his mother. His only two siblings had also died by 1848. Clarence developed an early interest in outdoor exploration and natural history, which was encouraged by his mother and by Reverend Dry Roswell Park, head of the Christ Church Hall School in Pomfret, Connecticut that Clarence attended until he was 10. He then attended schools in Boston and New Haven, and at age 13 was accepted to the prestigious Hartford High School. He was a good student and a versatile athlete, of short stature but unusually strong. His mother received an income from the King family business until it met with a series of problems and dissolved in 1857. After a few years of straitened circumstances, during part of which Clarence suffered from a serious depression, his mother married George S. Howland in July 1860. Howland financed Clarence's enrollment in the Sheffield Scientific School affiliated with Yale College in 1860. College life and early career. At Yale, King specialized in applied chemistry, and also studied physics and geology. One inspiring teacher was James Dwight Dana, a highly regarded geologist who had participated in a scientific expedition to the South Atlantic, South Pacific, and the west coasts of South and North America. King graduated with a Ph.B. in July 1862. He and several friends borrowed one of Yale's rowboats that summer for a trip along the shores of Lake Champlain and a series of Canadian rivers, then returned to New Haven for the fall regatta. In October 1862, on a visit to the home of his former professor George Jarvis Brush, King heard Brush read aloud a letter he had received from William Henry Brewer telling of an ascent of Mount Shasta in California, then believed to be the tallest mountain in the country. King began to read more about geology, attended a lecture by Louis Agassiz, and soon wrote to Brush that he had pretty much made up my mind to be a geologist if I can get work in that direction. Quote, he was also fascinated by descriptions of the Alps by John Tyndall and John Ruskin. In late 1862 or early 1863, King moved to New York City to share an apartment with James Terry Gardner, a close friend from high school and college. They associated with a group of American artists, writers, and architects who were admirers of John Ruskin. In February 1863, King became one of the founders, along with John William Hill, Clarence Cook and others, of the Ruskinian Association for the Advancement of Truth in Art, an American group similar to the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and was elected its first secretary. But he was anxious to see the mountains of the American West, and his friend Jim Gardner was miserable in law school. By May 1863, King, Gardner, and an acquaintance named William Hyde traveled by railroad to Missouri and then joined a wagon train, which they left at Carson City, Nevada. King and Gardner soon continued on to California, where King joined the California Geological Survey without pay, in which he worked with William H. Brewer, Josiah D. Whitney, and later Gardner and Richard D. Cotter. In July 1864, King and Cotter made the first ascent of a peak in the eastern Sierra that King named Mount Tyndall in honor of one of his heroes. Further, they discovered several higher peaks, including the one that came to be named Mount Whitney. In September 1864, upon the designation by President Abraham Lincoln of the Yosemite Valley area as a permanent public reserve, King and Gardner were appointed to make a boundary survey around the rim of Yosemite Valley. They returned to the East Coast by way of Nicaragua the following winter. King suffered from several bouts of malaria in the spring and summer of 1865, while Whitney, also in the East, worked on securing funding for further survey projects. King, Gardner, Whitney, and Whitney's wife sailed back to San Francisco in the fall, where Whitney lined up a survey project for King and Gardner in the Mojave Desert in Arizona under U.S. Army auspices. They returned to San Francisco in the spring, and King returned to Yosemite in the summer of 1866 to make more field notes for Whitney. When King heard of the death of his stepfather, he and Gardner resigned from the Whitney survey and once again sailed to New York. They had been developing a plan for an independent survey of the Great Basin region for some time, and in late 1866 King went to Washington to secure funding from Congress for such a survey. 40th Parallel Survey and Diamond Hoax Discovery. King made a persuasive argument for how his research would help develop the West. He received federal funding and was named U.S. geologist to the geological exploration of the 40th parallel, commonly known as the 40th Parallel Survey. In 1867, he persuaded Gardner to be his second-in-command, and they assembled a team that included, among others, Samuel Franklin Emmons, Arnold Haig, A.D. Wilson, the photographer Timothy H. O'Sullivan, and guest artist Gilbert Munger. Over the next 6 years, King and his team explored areas from eastern California to Wyoming. During that time he also published his famous Mountaineering in the Sierra Nevada. While King was finishing the 40th Parallel Survey, the western U.S. was abuzz with news of a secret diamond deposit. King and some of his crew tracked down the secret location in northwest Colorado, and exposed it as a fraud, now known as the Diamond Hoax of 1872. He became an international celebrity through exposing the hoax. In 1878, King published Systematic Geology, numbered Volume 1 of the Report of the Geological Exploration of the 40th Parallel, although it appeared later than all but one of the other 7 volumes. In this work he narrated the geological history of the West as a mixture of uniformitarianism and catastrophism. This book was well received at the time and has been called one of the great scientific works of the late 19th century. In 1879, the U.S. Congress consolidated the number of geological surveys exploring the American West and created the United States Geological Survey. King was chosen as its first director. He took the position with the understanding that it would be temporary, and he resigned after 20 months, having overseen the organization of the new agency with an emphasis on mining geology. He named John Wesley Powell as his successor. During the remaining years of his life, King withdrew from the scientific community and attempted to profit from his knowledge of mining geology, but the mining ventures he got involved in were not successful enough to support his expensive tastes in art collecting, travel, and elegant living, and he went heavily into debt. He had a busy social life, with close friendships, including Henry Brooks Adams and John Hay, who admired him tremendously, but he suffered from physical ailments and depression, common-law marriage, and passing as African American. King spent his last 13 years leading a double life. In 1887 or 1888, he met and fell in love with Ada Copeland, an African American nursemaid from Georgia, who had moved to New York City in the mid-1880s. As miscegenation was strongly discouraged in the 19th century, King hid his identity from Copeland. Despite his blue eyes and fair complexion, King convinced Copeland that he was an African-American Pullman porter named James Todd. The two entered into a common-law marriage in 1888. Throughout the marriage, King never revealed his true identity to Ada, pretending to be Todd, a black railroad worker, when at home, and continuing to work as King, a white geologist, when in the field. The union produced 5 children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. Their 2 daughters married white men. Their 2 sons served classified as blacks during World War I. King finally revealed his true identity to Copeland in a letter he wrote to her while on his deathbed in Arizona. Death and legacy. King died of tuberculosis in Phoenix, Arizona, and was buried in Newport, Rhode Island. King's Peak in Utah, Mount Clarence King, and Clarence King Lake at Shasta, California are named in his honor, as is King Peak in Antarctica. The U.S. Geological Survey Headquarters Library in Reston, Virginia, is also known as the Clarence King Library. Bibliography. Works about King: Emmons, Samuel Franklin. Biographical Memoir of Clarence King. Hague, James D. ed. Clarence King Memoirs. The Helmet of Mambrino, New York. Published for the King Memorial Committee of the Century Association by G.P. Putnam Sons. Shebel, James. King of the Mountains. A Study of King's Mountaineering in the Sierra as Literature. Stockton, CA, University of the Pacific. Original drawings by L. F. Bjorklund. Extensive bibliography. Wild, Peter. Clarence King. Western Writer Series. 48. Boise, Idaho. Boise State University. ISBN 978-088-4300724. OCLC 7,628,120. Wilkins, Thurman, Lawson, Hinckley, Caroline. Clarence King, A Biography. University of New Mexico Press. ISBN 08263-10850. Sachs, Aaron. The Humboldt Current. 19th-century exploration in the roots of American environmentalism. Viking. King, one of 4 Americans on whom the author focuses, was influenced by Alexander von Humboldt. Wilson, Robert. The Explorer King, Adventure, Science, and the Great Diamond Hulks. Clarence King in the Old West. Scribner, ISBN 0-7432-60252. Sandweiss, Martha A. Passing Strange, A Gilded Age Tale of Love and Deception Across the Color Line. New York, Penguin Press. ISBN 9781594202001. Works by King: The Three Lakes, Marion, Lal, Jan, and How They Were Named. 1870. Report of the Geological Exploration of the 40th Parallel. United States Government Printing Office, 1870–1878. On the Discovery of Actual Glaciers in the Mountains of the Pacific Slope. American Journal of Science and Arts, Volume I, March 1871. Active glaciers within the United States. The Atlantic Monthly, Volume 27, number 161, March 1871. Mountaineering in the Sierra Nevada. Boston, James R. Osgood and Company, 1872. John Hay, Scribner's Monthly, v. 7, number 6, April, 1874. Catastrophism and Evolution. The American Naturalist, Volume 11, No. 8, August 1877. Statistics of the production of the precious metals in the United States. United States Government Printing Office, 1881. The United States Mining Laws and Regulations thereunder. United States Government Printing Office, 1885. The Helmet of Mambrino. The Century Magazine, Volume 32, No. 1 May 1886. The Age of the Earth. American Journal of Science. Volume 45. January 1893. Shall Cuba be free? The Forum. September 1895. Report of the Public Lands Commission. United States Government Printing Office, 1903 to 1905.